Welcome to Executive Connect Live, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kavitha Mariappan, Executive VP of Customer Experience and Transformation here at Zscaler. Today, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity challenges specific to the ANZ region and how our guest is tackling them. Like Australia, New Zealand has experienced a recent surge in cyber incidents. The National Cybersecurity Centre reported 316 cybersecurity incidents it disrupted, detected, or advised on in between the years of 2022 and 2023. It noted that the proportion of financially motivated activity has exceeded state-sponsored activity for the first time, and said that criminal activity has a greater potential impact to New Zealand's well-being. Australia in recent years has also seen a series of high-profile attacks, including Optus, Medibank, and Forcenet. The ANZ region and surrounding nations stand to gain greater resilience with more collaboration among leading businesses, governmental organizations, and experts. So joining me today is Darren Beattie, the head of information security at Tower Insurance and a lifelong practitioner of infrastructure technology, service operations, and management. He is an experienced team builder and a security leader who previously trained and managed security groups for Lexel Systems and Spark New Zealand. At Tower Insurance, Darren ensures that secure operations and communications spanning from New Zealand across 6 Pacific Island nations. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. After about 30 minutes of Darren and I chatting, and we're going to keep this pretty fluid, pretty organic, we'll go back and forth and have a chat. I'll bring in audience questions. So if you have comments or questions for us as part of the panel, please add it to the chat. Today's discussion will be recorded and will be shared on LinkedIn and CXO Revolutionaries on Zscaler.com. We will share key takeaways and resources at the end of our discussion as well. So let's dive right in. Darren, welcome to the session, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone.
Nice to have you, Darren. I know before we got started, Darren and I were chatting about the weather, and I'm here in sunny Northern California. We're heading into summer, and Darren tells me it's absolutely freezing down there right now. So let's hopefully bring you some California sun right through this conversation today.
Please.
All right. Well, let's get started. So, Darren, we'll set a little bit of a context around the organization itself. If you can share with our audience a little bit about Tower Insurance, what the organization does, and a little bit about your security program specific to
Yes, certainly. So Tower Insurance is a general insurer. It's over, as my CEO said, it's a 154-year-old startup company. We insure house, home, car, boats, etc. For our communities here in New Zealand, and also around some of the Pacific Islands. So as you can see behind me, we're celebrating 150 years in Fiji this year. We have a large presence in Fiji. We've also got Samoa, American Samoa, Tonga, Cook Islands, Vanuatu, and such as. So it's a good presence around the islands as well. So providing that general insurance to our communities, that's what we do best. From a security perspective, it's all about keeping our customers safe. It's about keeping our staff safe, our data safe as well. And again, just adapting and adjusting to the new and evolving technologies that come out that assist us in protecting us against those threat actors that's out there.
Now, the 2 key things you mentioned there, obviously data, a lot of it, a lot of disparate data and in different formats, structures across multiple locations. The other being that, you are a B2C organization, so you are carrying a lot of PII data of your end consumers as well. So I'd like to kind of, touch on, let's talk a little bit about data strategy. And as an insurance company, what kind of data are you looking to protect? I know you mentioned kind of, information that insuring houses, boats, a lot of Right, auto, all of that. But like, what are the specifics? And what, when we think about data, we think about crown jewels. So what are you looking to protect more? And what would be the impact, I guess, of losing that data? I know I'm oversimplifying it as we talk about PII, but let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so unpacking it, there's a number of elements that, data points that we all look at in regarding to a customer, again, from your PII aspects, your detail, your home and such as. But that can also stem into your working environment as well, for your car journeys and such as around what you do with your car, some trips. Again, some cars have the technology to actually record where you're going and aspects around that, and that can bring in information around it. Your valuables. So again, when you've got valuable contents in your house, you normally declare those with your insurance provider. So if your data is leaked and details of what those valuables are, then that could be a good commodity for different types of threat actors around. Basically also aspects of how are we calculating our policies? What formulas are being used, and how are we basing on risk and where a person is located? How is all that calculation done? Again, that is sensitive information that is, could be ripe for some organizations to try and get hold of.
And I think it's such an interesting discussion, right? So much to cover here, because you touched upon a couple of really interesting things. One is obviously the user and the user, critical information, date of birth, passport, driver's license, home address, and maybe some banking information. We'll park that for a minute. And then the other aspect of it obviously is valuables, right? Now that information is being presented, right? Makes them a target. And then the other element is, despite, even if you're keeping them safe, in the sort of the calculus of risk, you're also looking at the amount of digital footprint somebody has online that might insure with you, and how additional information that they have is out there on the open internet, right? And so we really need to start thinking very differently about how you calculate risk, and from a user perspective.
You do, and if you look at some of the technologies that we use today just to authenticate and get access to different systems as engineering staff, we look at the staff members' persona and their risk, and it's really important to do the same from a customer perspective as well, because identifying that a customer credentials have been leaked on the dark web or something like that, one, helps engagement with the customer, but also can stop them from further embarrassment effectively in some cases, and obviously financial impact and things like that for the customer. So it's a community-based aspect of risk and helping each other. And it's really, really vital and important to do.
That's very important. Thanks for sharing. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about the region specifically, the ANZ region. And you mentioned, threat actors, obviously. So what type of attacks are you seeing specific to the region, right? That's different to what we're seeing either in Europe or in North America, what your peers are doing?
I think recently with the geopolitical events in Europe, Russia and Ukraine and such as, there was obviously a lot more targeted areas for the Europeans and the North American entities than there was in this part of the world. But as that conflict went on, we did start to see aspects of threat actors coming down to target Australian and New Zealand entities because they were showing their support. But there was a delay.
Okay.
Obviously, in Australia, there's been some quite publicized data breaches that's impacted through, but again, that's the same in most other parts of the world too. A lot of things here is we're starting to get into more of the scamming and trying to get the credentials and phishing campaigns and items like that. We see a lot more of those here. But again, it's the world of security. we're all strung together with little pieces of fibre. And the fact is that I'm in New Zealand. It's no different to being in the UK or North America these days.
Yeah.
It's a strange world.
Technology has made the world bigger and smaller. Yeah.
It has, yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Darren, based on that, obviously there needs to be some regional level, I would say, threat intel sharing, collaboration, some level of like governance and standardization. How is that collaboration, information sharing between New Zealand and Australia going specific to this? Because obviously you sell policies to clients in across the border, right? And so how is that handled?
It's interesting because with a lot of things here in New Zealand, policies and legislation sometimes follow what happens in Australia. Mm-hmm. So we're always taking a watching brief on aspects like the Australian Essential 8 as an example. New Zealand has the Information Security Manual. We have a different version of it. The threat intelligence is definitely fed from different vendors and sources between the two countries. And realistically, a lot of the large enterprise organizations are present in both Australia and New Zealand.
Okay.
So there's no real discrepancy between the two. When you start going into the smaller organizations, therefore you rely on your relevant security partners here in New Zealand to give you that granular information relating to New Zealand type threat actors and attack surfaces.
I think the other aspect of it might also be just user behavior and user awareness, right?
That's a big thing. I've been in New Zealand now 16 years, and I have definitely seen a massive improvement in the security culture, in the awareness out there. I think, when we've had publicized breaches like the Latitude breach, there was a lot of people impacted, and everyone sort of realized, it's not something that happens in the US. It's not something that happens in Europe. It's happened here. It's impacted, me directly, and having to go and get a new driver's license or a new credit card or something, and so it's heading home. And because, as you said, the technology makes us a small world, everyone's getting smarter. Everyone's researching more. There's more information coming out now that enables the end users and consumers to actually improve their own security knowledge. And it's good to see, but there's still a lot more to do.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen a heightened level of, awareness and education, to the common citizen, right, across the region by saying, well, these are the 3 things you need to be doing if you do 3 things to know. And be aware of those things. And I think like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't think anyone would have even thought that. But the level of literacy, digital literacy and online literacy needing to become something that's just part of day to day is fantastic to see. And you're right, there's plenty of work to be done yet. Let's talk a little bit about government, obviously, and I've seen the movement obviously in Australia, but if you could share a little bit in New Zealand as well, how is the government in New Zealand as well as cross border helping your organization and your end users in terms of countering these threats, mitigating these threats?
So there's been we have a service called CERT NZ, and that's a part of the government regime to present customers and consumers the ability to report incidents and give them advice and such as. And again, seeing that uptake with the consumers is really good. There's a lot of discussions, obviously, of what's happening in around the US, especially around AI policies coming into Europe, around the protection of people, the protection of people's data and such as through some of those other breaches that has happened. So again, it's very much New Zealand is sort of watching at what's happening in Australia. And you can see that I'm not going to say follow and completely align to it, but definitely say, okay, Australia's doing this. That's a good idea. This bit's good. Actually, that's not relevant for New Zealand. We'll tweak that. So there's definitely a lot of synergies between the two that's coming along. It's good. Again, I think there's still the whole aspect of we're one world, and politics shouldn't get involved in these type of things, but unfortunately, it does.
Sadly, and I don't think the bad guys are looking at politics or borders. They're looking at what they can monetize.
Exactly.
Right. So Darren, we've sort of scared everybody by saying, there's a lot of bad things going on. So let's talk about solutions, right? In terms of like the threat landscape. You obviously got ahead of this as a security leader, by and as part of that, looking at your organization, and as part of that, looking at your security position to go with zero trust security a few years ago. Tell us, if you could share with our audience, how that journey's been, if you've seen, what kind of difference it's made specifically.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, one of the big enablers was actually, unfortunately, the COVID outbreak. All of a sudden, we all had to work remotely. We still had to give a level of security and compliance to our staff, being able to work and operate through. And so that changed a lot of the mindsets, and maybe we could do things slightly differently. I'm a great believer on people being able to work anywhere, anyhow, anyway, at any time. So using the tool sets, I mean, in this case, Zscaler is one of the tools that enables us to be able to provide those capabilities out to the end user to, one, give visibility. Secondly, to give that level of protection and confidence to the staff member that they can do their work safely and securely, even from the local McDonald's cafe or something like that. It's the ability to do that. That was a big enabler. Right. And it's also the transition to the cloud. Lots of organizations are going onto that journey. So the old school idea of having a perimeter firewall in most cases is gone. The idea of the network is gone. So you have to start looking at moving into that zero trust type technologies and world of operation. Because again, everything is changing. How you consume a service is going to change, and how you authenticate is changing. Your device is changing all the time. One of the big issues that we found during COVID times was actually trying to get hardware.
Yeah.
And you couldn't go down to the local hardware IT store and buy some laptops or desktops, because they didn't have any. And suddenly the ideas of where you had a sort of fixed regime of type of infrastructure, it went out the window. You suddenly had your kid's Chromebook or your wife's MacBook or something like that you would never use in our sort of corporate style organization, was now having to be used because that was the only thing that was available.
Which kind of opens up the whole, paradigm of how do we approach BYOD, and why do we want as organizations to carry so many physical assets that now you have to depreciate and write off? Like, if you could sanction these devices in the right way and have the right controls in place and implement the right policies, then potentially people could be using their own devices, phones.
This is it. And like you said earlier on about user risk, right. Well, that ties into device risk. So when you start looking at your devices, what's going on with your device? Have you got anti-malware? Have you got your security controls? All those type of things, are you patching up to date, etc. So now you can build up a risk posture based on the user's identity, what they want to access, and how they want to access it, where they're accessing it from, what type of device, and therefore you can now say this user is a medium risk. Right. And therefore, I'm going to give them access to certain corporate functions, but I'm not going to give them access to the crown jewels. Right. Because there's still a level of risk there.
Fine grained enforcement of policy, right? Based on identity posture. Right.
Identity, device posture, environment around you. Right. And also even things like time of day.
Yeah, interesting. Behavioral anomalies, right?
this is it. I mean, it's sometimes, you may have to work at 9 o'clock at night or something. That's early for some people. But you can go along and hang on. Why is Darren working at this time? Why is Darren doing that? That's not normal. So you get into those user behavior aspects as well to identify, what's your risk posture.
And I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was saying risk is such a big. I mean, people often.
I'm an insurance company.
And I think people think about security risk, compliance, privacy, all is like in one bucket, but they're actually, risk specifically, quantifying risk, giving people sort of the good driver discount for what you model as good risk and bad risk is different, right? And I think it's really interesting to see your perspective from as an insurance provider. And Darren, one of the things you touched on, which was interesting, right? You said, look, the mega trends of cloud mobility, they happened. And then the acceleration, the catalyst there was obviously COVID as well, which really forced a lot of stuff to move faster. But at the end of the day, the internet kind of became your new network, right? That's what you're using. And you're like, the cloud has become more and more the new data center. So yep. If that's happening, why is security, or why are other organizations investing in security posture that really is protecting a physical perimeter that is no longer in place? People are remote. People are, using SaaS applications. They're using potentially certain private applications that are, on-prem still. But in general, this is already happening. User mobilities are there, device proliferation's there. And so the rethinking of the security posture is kind of what you embraced. Did you have any challenges like when you did that? Obviously, you had to do it in a hurry because of COVID and all of that. But what was some like the top of mind challenges? And then now that we're 3 years out of sort of COVID, what are you seeing?
I think one of the big challenges, as you touched on too, is we've gone away from that perimeter and getting the end user mindset away from I'm inside a castle, I'm protected.
Right.
The education with the end users and so even some of the senior leaders and such as to say that this technology and this methodology of working, will help us, but it's still secure. So education was definitely one of the big challenges. And secondly, you've got to prove it actually works. So it's all very well and good in setting these things up and access to this and access to that, but prove it actually works and prove it is secure as well. So again, testing those deployment that have been done, that it still meets your design element that you and your goals that you were trying to achieve. It sounds, it's not rocket science to me, but you've got to, if you're putting something in, you've got to test it, make sure it's right. Yes, we're good. Move on. If it's not right, well, let's pause, reevaluate, understand. Have we misconfigured? Is it a user issue? Is it a technology issue? Is it simply a tick box that we haven't done? What is it? And then again, reevaluate, retest, and carry on. Some of the other challenges has been legacy applications. It's working in a world where we are hybrid, hybrid both from working, but also from cloud, data center, application style. Being able to try and get some of those legacy applications to work in this modern way.
Right.
And so sometimes you may have to come up with a jump host or a different style of connection. But what you want to ensure that you do is do not impact the end user experience. Yeah. Because the last thing that happens is the end user will complain, IT has done this, security has done that, and you don't get that relationship that you really need in fostering. So making sure that end user experience is good too.
No, I think that's an interesting thing to touch on as well, because, I don't know when you went into this, obviously, how quickly you were able to stand up Zero Trust with Zscaler. I don't know how quick that was, and from your journey through COVID, I'm assuming it was faster than anticipated.
Yeah, it was faster. But again, it's taking those milestone steps to make sure you're doing the right thing as you go through. And Zero Trust is not a product that you just implement and woe to go and that's it, you're finished. It is a journey. It's an evolution through. The technology changes, the user's behavior changes, your systems, your business change. And therefore, you have to be able to quickly adapt and adjust where appropriate for those type of accesses and risk-based decisions. So it really has been just a very quick journey to begin with, to get that ball rolling. And then very carefully, it's okay, what's the next element we want to do? We want to do this particular system. Check, verify, implement. Good. What's the next one? What's the next one? Because again, the end users are impacted. They get access to things slightly differently. And we've got to make sure that they're on board and they get the right level of experience. To make sure they can operate and serve our customers at the end of the day.
Of course. I think the first part of what you said in terms of prioritizing what needs to get done, because there's plenty that needs to get done. Not everything needs to get done straight away. It's auditing your environment and auditing your crown jewels, right? Figuring out what needs to be absolutely protected in a vault, right? And what doesn't matter so much. That being one in terms of how you obviously segment your network, right? And then the other side of it is, as you look at applications, this often becomes an exercise for a lot of people going, well, I've got 4,000 applications and I've got 500 of them where I've got like 3 or 10 users per app. Many of them are legacy applications. Do I really need to be maintaining these applications? Do I need to lift and shift these, or, do I need to refactor these, or can we retire some of these? Because there's one, not necessarily like low value user, but, is this serving the purpose? Because every one of these are going to expand or widen your attack surface. So,
and this is it. This is the thing where it actually encourages you to do that hygiene check, that life cycle management, as you say, of some of those applications that are really important to Bob and Alice over there. But that's it.
Right.
And is that really the right thing for them to do? They only use it twice a week. Can we do something different? So. And that also means that you reduce your cost of operations as well. Because some of these may be licensed, they may need extended support because they could be very old applications as well. They may not even have support. And there may be other dependencies too that you can then retire, and just to keep your own estate in a healthy, modernized way so you can pivot and shift as you need to.
Right. And I think that that's awesome, right? I mean, you're thinking through this as this is a transformation. This is a revolution, somewhat, not slightly evolutionary. It is a rethink of how you do things. And so part of what you said earlier on is I've got to make sure it's the right experience for everybody. I've got to win internal champions. I've got to go in there and communicate and make sure that they're seeing success and the user experience is not impeded. Specifically, your high value users like your board and your executive management and certain other users, right? Because this is about internal champion building. Now, Darren, I've got a couple of questions. You've got me thinking about a bunch of things. But as you went through that process, right? Obviously security led a lot of this. IT and security having to partner together because, again, the previous paradigm was very different in any organization as you think about kind of legacy network architecture and legacy application architecture and security, right? And so how did you go about doing that? Did you, it's COVID, obviously, we've got to get up and running. We've got to protect everybody and have a, remote workforce even before hybrid happened. Was this led by security? Was it led by IT? How did IT and security sort of work together on this?
Well, at this time, IT and security are together inside Tower. The big thing is actually having that existing relationship. And a lot of people believe when you talk to the security team, the answer is no. What was the question? And it's not that. It's around about how can we work together to do the right thing for the organization and make sure that we all meet our particular goals into there. it's also seeing that what's in it for them. So they, as I said earlier on about the life cycle of applications, therefore they can do some things in there. They can get efficiency gains potentially in that sense. Costings as well. And again, the relationship between the relevant departments is, in our case, is very, very strong. It's really important to have that. And I think there has been a paradigm shift in the old days where security teams sat over there and you don't go near them. Whereas now they're actually embedded into a lot of again, we have Sec DevOps now. So you're seeing security embedded into lots of different things in different shapes and guises. So it's the challenge has sort of moved away, I would say, moving away, which is good. But again, those relationships are vital. I'm bringing those teams on that journey.
I think it's spot on, right? A big part of that is not, this big part of success with the transformation journey specifically is not about the technology. It's a cultural change. It's about winning internal champions. And it's about alignment with the business specifically, right? The business that you are there to serve as IT and security.
This is it. We set up a champions group for, let's say, Windows 11 as an example. And therefore we brought different people of the business in to go and have a look at the new Insiders edition of Windows 11, get the latest features, the latest releases, on an example. Take that out to the business, see what the feedback is. And then it also means that we can experiment with new features inside our operating system. And therefore the champions are seeing it out there with the rest of the teams. And the other teams go, we want this. This would help us. And now everyone gets engaged. So forming a security champions, infrastructure champion, data champions, I think with different people around the organization is really, really vital. It's not just a group of techies, getting together and coming up with buzzword bingo. It's getting the business involved in actually making those good decisions on what's right for the business, and they're now part of the journey, which is a great outcome.
That's an awesome point to make, right? Because this is precisely champion building, and others sort of seeing the success of that, and then wanting to sort of follow suit. That's fantastic. And I think this is a best practice that a lot of people can learn from. So as we talk about this, we've got one more mega trend out there, AI. We haven't touched on that. There's no podcast, or there's no video cast or LinkedIn Live or anything if we don't talk about AI specifically. So let's do that. What extent are you guys seeing and thinking about opportunities specific to generative AI in your environment? Good and bad.
Okay, so yes, good and bad, and that's the key message. If you look at AI is not you. We've had machine learning, we've had other aspects all the way through. It's just with ChatGPT coming out and the sort of the marketing around that has really invigorated people. But it's also got people thinking. And it now means that people can look at things and how can we make processes more efficient? How can we get the information quickly to staff members? So if you're looking up about what details does this policy can contain, well, I can go and quickly ask an internal search engine, which is an AI model. AI can also help you with some of that data enrichment of looking at, New Zealand is not a geostationary country. We do have earthquakes and adverse weather and such as, and using modeling data and such as to make risk-based decisions on actually that house at the edge of the cliff is a little bit dodgy. It's a bit risky to do that. So using technology like that is really good. But the challenge is also you've got to look at the data that you're feeding it. You've got to look at your data points. You've got to look and make sure that those data points are the right data points and are secured. So if you look at some of these technologies that embed inside your organization, you got to make sure you got security, classification, labeling, governance around your data. Because the last thing you want to do is for someone to be able to type in and, can I get my CEO's salary? Bing.
Right.
You know, and so it's helping people do the right things, but it's also can be a hindrance.
Yeah.
But conversely, on the outside with the threat actors and such is, it's never ending. I mean, we've seen in Hong Kong with the deepfake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a start of it. What's next? How do we detect deepfakes? Yeah, and that's going to get a challenge in the court of law when you start bringing in digital evidence.
Right.
How can you prove that this is real? Well, I can't.
What's the precedence around that, and how do we litigate, right, and actually press charges for around so many of these new areas and things? No, this is awesome. So, couple of things I think you've touched upon. Good AI and generative AI being good. There are so many fantastic use cases that we can leverage that for, that could actually make better solutioning, better decision making. But as we all know, in the world of data science, you need a lot of data, and you need to make sure that your data sources are clean, right? Otherwise, you're modeling and training, I would say suboptimal models. So
Yep.
then the outcomes are going to be not what you're looking for. I think that's that. And then obviously creating guardrails within the organization so that, we can use AI, but there's some protocol around how to do it. So as you said,
Yes.
people don't go put that information out there. It's right there out on the web. And then the other element of it is how threat actors are using it. So I think everyone's sort of trying to figure this out with some guardrails and use cases.
This is it. But the other thing is you've got to allow, in the case of, say, setting up a dirty network effectively, where you can put models in and allow your teams to experiment with dummy data, obfuscated data, things like that, to actually experiment. How can we do things better for our business? But it also allows us in the security world to go and test things.
Right.
Pretend to be the bad guys, using AI to go and generate phishing campaigns and things like that. A recent example is I did a phishing campaign before the end of tax year, and I used ChatGPT, and it created a legit looking tax email. And 2 minutes.
See?
Done. Now, if I can do that, what can the smart people do? And again, we don't know what they're working on. We don't know what's happening in their world and what the next evolution is. And now with things like ChatGPT 4.0, where you've got voice, and you've also got your video feeds again. So how do you verify people? How do you verify? Because when you phone up your financial institutions, you can use voice recognition. Well, I'm sorry, that's now can be faked.
Like what kind of campaigns are they going to be running based on the ability to sort of manipulate generative AI for these outcomes, right? I think it's going to be an interesting time. I mean, there's a lot of good there, fantastic amount. And
Yes.
I think getting ahead of it, and information sharing across organizations is going to be interesting, because the last thing we want is overregulation around a situation that no one understands, because the potential for good is there as much as there's a potential for misuse. And so I think this is where, as technologists, as security leaders and practitioners, sort of taking a seat at the table and actually driving that discussion, like you said, we've got groups that are sharing information, tabletop exercises that you're running, what it looks like, right?
Yeah, and again, we look at things like, we always talked about DLP.
Right.
Where's our data going out? How is it going out? And things like that. But when you start using some of these models, we now got to look at data coming in. What data is coming into us? Is it legitimate data? Is it from a trusted source? Because again, a lot of these models, realistically have learned from everything that we put on the internet for the last 30 odd years. And that's all true and accurate. And it's going to take time for that to get through its systems. And so if I want to use an output from an AI engine, I've got to know that the data it's got it from is trusted. And how do we do that with public models as an example and such as? So again, your data points, your control of your data is really, really vital.
I think it's really interesting you said that because, looking at DLP, we always think about data exfiltration in terms of what data is being exfiltrated out of the organization, which is very important, right? Critical to a successful security program. But the other side of it is like, what data are we ingesting, and what those sources look like that potentially help us make better decisions.
This is it, because you're making a business decision based on some of that data. Now, if that data is completely wrong, where it had been a threat actor had gone in and ingested completely false information, well, now you as an organization are now liable for, you said, well, we made a decision based on this.
Right.
Now what? And it's a very interesting time, as you said, on how we govern this and how do we protect ourselves. And I think, to be absolutely open, everyone's learning.
Everyone's learning, and I think making sure that you're not buying, like you said, you prefaced it spot on. You said zero trust security is not a product. I'm going to go get it off a shelf. It's an architectural framework with very specific key tenets, and specific to how we address identity, how we address proxy, how we address endpoints, how we address all of that, right? And we need to be thinking about this from a framework perspective, and not here's a firewall, here's product, and that way, as we're evolving and learning and doing what we need to be doing, we're ensuring that we're minimizing that attack surface. We're ensuring that the enterprise is protected, your end users are protected, and your users, your workloads, your devices, everything that your user base is traversing through is protected, and obviously the reputation of your franchise and the safety of everyone. So I think it's really important. I think having established a zero trust posture, I'd like to understand a little bit about what have you seen in terms of results, like outcomes. Okay, now that going from the old world to the new world, I'm oversimplifying obviously, but what have you seen in terms of the number of threats, number of tickets filed? And kind of your...
The big thing has been the user experience.
Okay.
The flexibility that it allows the end user to operate. Again, coming back into the office environment, organizations still allow people to, work from home, for family things, keep that work-life balance, because again, now that's really, really important. So having that flexibility. And the other good thing about it has been that the end users don't complain to IT and security about it anymore, because things just work. They've got the access, they're in the right area, they're in the right groups, they're in the right level of risk. Therefore, they get access to things. And that can also then improve the end user's behavior as well, not just from just what they're doing for that particular role, but their own security and personal aspects, because they're now more aware. Well, maybe I shouldn't go to that website, that does movie streaming or something like that, because they're now aware that could do something to their machine, that could actually impact a keylogger, whatever, to then go and do things on. The big thing has just been that flexibility, and also the ease to bring in new applications, new services, and not have to worry about putting a firewall change request in, getting it tested, and such as, and getting that put through a whole change control and things like that. You can introduce new services a lot easier. As businesses evolve, technologies evolve, and such as, it just makes life, a lot easier for everyone.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, we could probably do a part 2 of this and just M&A, introduction of new application services, and insider threat. So we might well do that, if you're open to it. I wanted to tackle a couple of questions, Darren, from our audience here. I've got one question here. Says, is mobile device security a big concern for Tower? And the second part of that question is, does serving island nations require sizable mobile infrastructure?
Okay, so mobile device security. So at the end of the day, if I go and give an end user a telephony device, that's towers. Therefore, I still need to be able to protect that device could have access to different systems, and such as if someone loses that device, you still need to protect it, because again, it has data on it that could relate to a customer or anything like that. So you still treat the same controls as you would with a laptop. I treat a laptop as a mobile device because it's mobile. I can carry it around. I can lose it. I can leave it in the back of a taxi. And that's the same with your mobile phone or your tablets. Right. So you don't treat them any different in that way. And the good thing is a lot of the vendors have come on board and brought the tooling and such as so that the end user experience is the same.
Right. So devices are managed. Yeah. Your mobile endpoints are managed as part of the program.
This is what we do. You manage them because again they could hold data, and it just means that if something happens, I'm in control of that data point, potential data that could be on that device. As such as, and even if you have a personal device and you want to access, I still put controls there for access to systems. So if you wanted your Teams or your email or something like that, well, we control that. Right. So therefore, if something happens, we can securely make sure that's gone. The individual leaves the business.
Separation.
A lot of times you delete the user account, but that data is still on that personal device. Right. So again, it's about controlling and protecting the data. These days. Back to the islands. It's an interesting one because you do rely on the telcos out there to provide the relevant services, and to be honest, some of them are pretty good. And again, for there is they all get hooked into an undersea cable. So actually, what you're relying on is that undersea cable infrastructure, making sure that the country has the ability to connect to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And therefore, you start looking at other technologies like Starlink.
Yeah.
And such as to provide that extra resilience around, and you still treat it in the same way. It's a connection point.
Yeah. Does this increase the cost component significantly though, because of how disparate it is and what you're dealing with?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first point.
The cost component of having to add extra bandwidth connectivity specifically.
To be honest, it varies.
Okay.
Many years ago when I was in the military, I did satellite communications, and that was expensive.
Yeah.
I think with the Starlink service and others coming along, that price point has come down and actually makes it a lot more affordable for people. Here in New Zealand, there are lots of areas that do not have good internet connections, and therefore they have to rely on things like Starlink to connect to the world. So it definitely the pricing has come down, and that just makes it more affordable to businesses as well. Whereas in the past, you always was scared to get the satellite phone out and make a test call because you knew it was going to cost you a lot of dollars. But we don't have that problem today.
That's awesome. As an Aussie who's been living in the US for 25 years, I can tell you that I still think the coverage and connectivity, cell coverage, connectivity in the ANZ region is so much better than it is out here in the US still.
I'll pass on the message.
Australasia. But, yeah. Next question, Darren. We've got another question from Rick. The question is, how do you see the use of biometrics to enhance security, if any? How do you see its impact to privacy specifically?
It's an interesting one because, again, if you look at historic things in IT, we have been using biometrics, and we've never really thought about privacy in that sense. And now with some of the biometrics that you use, it depends where you store those particular algorithms and outputs that's used. So if you got it on your laptop, you use a fingerprint scanner. Again, it's stored on your chip. So you got the security of that. What information, if a threat actor managed to get in and get that data, what would it do to them? Because normally you use the biometrics as a second factor.
Right.
So they still need something else too. You're not seeing a lot of the reverse engineering of biometrics at the moment. Again, I stand corrected. I'm not seeing it. It's what else would it be for privacy side of it? Again, it's the controls, it's the access to those, being able to read the data, and such as. But again, I think a lot of the vendors have done well in that sense, in controlling and protecting that. In general, that's what I sort of feel. Again, I'm open for a discussion. If you've got other ideas and other opinions on that, happy to hear them here. It's good old debate. That's what it's for.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever tackled biometrics and sort of impact on privacy, but you do touch upon an interesting thing in terms of how long should data persist? Everything that we collect is data that's going to be stored somewhere, and I think a lot of the breaches that we've seen of late, especially in that region specifically, have been because of PII data that's been stored that potentially without a I would say like a trusted data strategy, right? I think, do we need to be keeping stuff around for as long as we're keeping stuff around, and how are we doing that?
And this just going back to what you're saying earlier on about the governments, and because of those type of breaches, it impacts the population. The population now starts screaming to the government to do some action. Right. So a cyber actor has attacked a corporate entity, but now the impact of that is now felt on a political sense. Yes. And therefore governments are changing legislation to ensure that you only keep data that's for as long as you actually need it, and you destroy it afterwards because of these type of things that has happened.
Hygiene, right? Data hygiene. I know people, we kept data around because of forensics, but like having a data strategy overall and thinking about kind of what the hygiene needs to be around this. So many things to talk about. A couple of questions. We might have to have you back. One of our favorite guests. Let's talk about, and we've talked a lot about cybersecurity, IT modernization, and then we've talked about AI. So many different factors. Clearly, we have a talent shortage problem globally around addressing this. And how is that in the region? And what are you and your peers, kind of in the industry doing about that?
Here in New Zealand, we have a different challenge in the fact that there's quite a lot of people escaping across the ditch to Australia because it's more money and things like. Sorry about that. Yeah, but also it's the fact is that one is a lot of people are not coming into the different countries. So again, there used to be a lot of movement around, but because the cost of living increases. That has an impact on why someone would want to go to a particular country to work, even though employers would sponsor them and such as because of their skill sets. It's also around about vendors and partners. We need to do more on education. We need to make the IT industry more attractive. I'm sorry to say we have to make security more attractive. Everything's not just about coding these days. Yes. And how do we do it? It is a challenge, and also if you think about now the way different systems are, we touch on so many different aspects, from your identity to your device to your network to your data. There's so much, and it's actually quite a skill set to be able to go and look at each of these different entities and make up what is going on, how things are flowing, what's the controls there, what's the risk associated with it. So we have to rely on partners, security partners, to help us. They're struggling as well to get the people in. And therefore, aspects that you mentioned earlier, AI comes into play, the automation. We have to do those type of things to try and help us. And it just, again, this part of the world, especially here in New Zealand, it's sometimes difficult to get educated into the security world. We don't get the wonderful RSA conferences and things like that. here. And so we have to rely on our blogs, our webinars like this and such as, and sometimes to go over to Australia to try and attend some of those big conferences, going into the local chapters of security groups, again, trying to share that knowledge, but also giving people the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, no, I think it's such an important point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a big challenge for everyone, not just here in New Zealand or Australia. Just trying to get people to come into that security world and see that it's actually a good space to be in.
Totally, I think it's a global problem, and I think with AI, as we go into this explosion of AI and generative AI and kind of the fourth revolution, we're also not just looking at IT and security scientists and practitioners, but we're also moving into kind of data science and domain scientists, right? So as we're starting to think about, modeling in healthcare and pharma and all of that, the domain science starts, the sciences, crossing the IT and the security realm starts to become really a new skill set.
And it's also things like IoT.
Right.
If you look at I know that some farmers are very heavily involved with IoT, and that's changed some of their farming lives.
Yes.
And you don't think of Farmer Jones talking about security of his cows in the field with some IoT devices, but we do now.
I mean, it becomes highly critical to know, like, when does he need to change tires in his tractor? When does the tractor need to be serviced? Does the local dealer have the parts based on weather? I mean, so technology can really help across these very legacy, I would say, traditional sectors where we haven't thought about leveraging tech. But that's awesome. I think we're coming up to kind of one of the close of the hour. We'll definitely have to have a second part of this, Darren. I think I'm enjoying this way too much. But I think if I was to do a call to action to all of us today, it would be interesting for us to start a little bit of a zero trust security working group, in the region, a community for information sharing, and I think we'll absolutely do that and probably reach out. So watch this space at Zscaler CXO Revolutionaries as a follow up to this session that we're doing. We'll start a little bit of a virtual working group, perhaps, and get a couple get a group of folks that are interested together, and let's have that conversation. Let's look at what type of certifications people need. And start to kind of address some of these important topics that folks need in their day-to-day in the industry today. But Darren, with that, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. So appreciate it, and it's been a fantastic discussion for me. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I certainly have, and again, I really appreciate you allowing me to talk today. And I think hopefully everyone's got something out of it. It's been really good to actually talk about what we're doing here in this part of the world. So thank you again.
It's awesome, and to all our attendees as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. More to come on this space. This isn't a one and done. We want to continue the dialogue. This is the beginning of some fantastic interactions out in the region with you, and I hope everybody stays warm.
It's actually raining here now, so
sorry. But from all of us here at Zscaler, everyone, please take care of yourself, stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time.